Ever since I was a small boy in Illinois, I've had a great personal admiration for Abraham Lincoln. So when we decided to recreate some of the great moments in Mr. Lincoln's life for the World's Fair, we directed all our energies to that task. We wanted to bring to the people of today the inspiring words of the man who held this nation together during its moment of greatest crisis, the Civil War. During our exhaustive research into Lincoln's life, we studied his mannerisms, his gestures, and even his voice characteristics to create a faithful likeness of this honored man. The final result is so lifelike that you might find it hard to believe. So when you visit the fair, be sure and stop by the State of Illinois Pavilion and spend a few moments with this great man.
Hello, and thanks for tuning into Off Harbor and Maine's Time and Place series. Today we'll be taking a look at great moments with Mr. Lincoln. But not any great moment, but rather the Walt Disney story featuring great moments with Mr. Lincoln, The Journey to Gettysburg, aka the Civil War version, or as I like to call it, the ASMR version. But before we get into it, I'm also joined by Beth.
Yo!
Matt.
Hello.
And Derek.
Hey, guys.
Just to provide some brief history of the attraction, and hopefully they'll be able to chime in with some of the ridiculousness of this version as well. But we'll be playing that a little later in the show as in its entirety, so hopefully you'll enjoy that. So thanks for joining us on this one. So I call this one the ASMR version because everything was done through headphones with binaural sounds, including sweet whispers from someone cutting your hair. But we'll get to that in just a moment. And in case you don't know what ASMR is, that's the Autonomous Sensory Meridian Response. So this is like something causes for you to have the goosebumps.
Like when someone whispers in your ear and you get chills.
Little tingles down your back or something like that. I think this one definitely caused a lot of people to have tingles down their back, as every time somebody whispered, everyone would like, woo, and like jump up in their seats.
I mean, I cringed a bit, yeah.
I mean, when you described it as that, though, I could only picture Lincoln like eating candy, like biting into the goodness, making a YouTube video.
Yeah.
No, that's not it?
Doing little flutters with his hands, in your face.
Just Lincoln saying, shh.
Yeah, that kind of was. Also, real quick, if you enjoy this episode, please find us on social media. You can find us on most platforms as at Off Harbor. And also, please don't hesitate to give us a review. We'd love any type of rating also. And without further ado, let's start back at the beginning. So back with great moments with Mr. Lincoln. Walt, if you go back to his childhood, Walt had a big admiration for Abraham Lincoln. He even recited the whole Gettysburg Address by memory in school. Soon after Disneyland opened, though, Walt envisioned an attraction down Liberty Street called One Nation Under God. And for those that don't know about Liberty Street, it was something that was heavily announced and kind of advertised on Main Street. You'd be entering on the right-hand side or the east side of Main Street. With the creation of the Audio-Animatronic with the Enchanted Tiki Room, the only natural next step would be a human figure. So Mr. Lincoln was a no-brainer from Walt. When Robert Moses, the head of the World's Fair in New York and the state of Illinois, employed the Walt Disney Company to create an attraction for the 1964 World's Fair, Walt thought this would be a perfect way to get traction to build his One Nation Under God attraction and the other 50-plus animatronics that were originally planned for this show. So, of course, the World's Fair brought us the Carousel of Progress, theater, the Magic Skyway, which is where the Primeval World scene with the T-Rex originated, which is now in the Disneyland Railroad, and It's a Small World, of course. So all four of these attractions all debuted at the New York's World's Fair. Obviously, Mr. Lincoln is a big part of this. So Blaine Gibson, many of you may know, he was a big sculptor for WDI and Walt Disney, and he's sculpted many of the most famous attractions from Haunted Mansion, Pirates of the Caribbean, and so on. I think he even did the partner statue in Disneyland. So he did Mr. Lincoln. So this debuted at the World's Fair April 22nd, 1964, And it ended up running through both of the 6-month stints at the World's Fair and ended up closing in October of 1965. So Disneyland would later open their own version at the Main Street Opera House on July 18th, 1965. So this was, of course, a duplicate animatronic, as the other show was still running in the World's Fair, which would close a few months later. And apparently the original was lost and was shipped back to Disney after the closure of the World's Fair and just forgotten about for decades, or so legend has it. But I guess apparently it was later found, and it's now put on display at Walt Disney's One Man's Dream pre-show exhibit area at MGM Studios, now Hollywood Studios.
Very interesting.
Side note,
Uh-huh.
I never realized how long the World's Fair went for. So is that typical? Like it's like a whole year and a half?
I don't think so. I don't think all of them lasted that long. Don't quote me on that. But yeah, this one was exceptionally long. I always heard about it being a year and a half, and then I just found out while researching the show that it was just 6-month stints. So there was a
Like
period. 2 chunks.
Oh, okay.
So it didn't go continuously. Makes sense. It's New York, so they probably didn't have it going in winter because it's probably
It's
freezing
freezing.
and snowing. Yeah. So I like doing this type of stuff because I'm learning new stuff every
Yeah.
episode.
Pretty cool.
So let's go through some of the iterations of the Great Moments of Mr. Lincoln. The original was presented by Lincoln Savings and Loan Association, and it did not require an A through E ticket admission due to it having a sponsor. So it was a free attraction, and it ended up closing in January 1st, 1973, as that coincided with the sponsorship ending as well. So after its closure, the Opera House became home to the Walt Disney Story on April 8th, 1973. This was, of course, a big part of, Walt passing away in 1966. And obviously, even though this was dedicated to Walt Disney, people were a little up in arms without having Lincoln. But in place of Lincoln was a 23-minute documentary of sorts with a lot of footage narrated by Walt himself. I assume this is a lot of the audio many of us have heard before, with Walt Disney providing his own accounts of his childhood through the creation of Disneyland. I think a lot of us have heard these recordings before. And after the show received a great deal of public criticism, even though this entire attraction was dedicated to Walt himself, guests felt Lincoln was really his biggest achievement, or one of his biggest achievements, and the best way to truly honor him. In 1975, Mr. Lincoln returned. The attraction would be renamed The Walt Disney Story, featuring Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln, and reopened July 12, 1975. This was featuring a redone Walt Disney film featured in the pre-show area, and all the exhibits would strictly be about Walt. In the main theater, however, the original show would return with just some slight alterations to Mr. Lincoln's speech. Updated in 1984, a new version of the pre-show film would debut with Walt Disney, and revisions to the show in the main theater also occurred with a new audio-animatronic, Abraham Lincoln, which was created with enhanced movements, facial expressions, had new clothing, new skin, and so forth. And the original 1964 World's Fair audio recordings were still used for the narration and speech by Lincoln, and portions were deleted. 2 new songs, Golden Dream and Two Brothers, were added to the production, as these were recently created for the American Adventure at Epcot Center. And who doesn't love Golden Dreams and Two Brothers? Am I right?
Oh, good. You just
Okay.
get chills.
Really
when you-
good.
The other brother.
So this version would end up closing in 2000. So this brings us to what we're here to talk about, really. It's the Walt Disney Story, featuring Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln, The Journey to Gettysburg, which debuted on Disneyland's birthday, July 17th, 2001. So the original Paul Frees and Royal, I think it's Dano recordings were removed, and both were eventually replaced by Corey Burton, who voiced Matthew Brady, and Warren Burton, who provided the voice for Lincoln. There were some changes, though. A new chair, other minor items changed throughout some set pieces, but the show itself would be drastically altered just to focus around the Civil War now, instead of about Lincoln's history and some other aspects of what we know of the show today. So this was a shorter program. It was only 12 minutes.
Was it
Yes,
really?
Yeah.
It felt so long.
When I was listening to this recording that I have, I was like, wait, it's already over. This was it? We loved it, but it was only 12 minutes long. The pre-show, I felt like, was probably longer, but guests would receive headphones when walking into the theater. They were cleaned after every use, but the entire show used these headphones. Much of the show didn't have too much to look at it either. It was kind of more or less like Sounds Dangerous from MGM Studios, but with Mr. Lincoln instead of Drew Carey. He would, as I talked about earlier, you would get a haircut, which also happened in Sounds Dangerous, and the binaural sound with whispers in the ear, blowing hair out of your ear, and even had a simulated battle in which you will soon hear. I always remember that big boom. I don't know if you guys remember this.
Oh.
It was like you had everything in the headphones, and then all of a sudden there was like a giant subwoofer in the theater that also went off. That was just like extremely loud. It was a good effect.
It scared me every time. Like, I knew it was coming, and I was still surprised.
Just wait for it. Boom. Yeah. I don't think it translates too well in the recording. It's probably a little too loud. I try to do my best on it. Anyway, to be honest, just looking back, it's quite silly looking, and I think today's version kind of holds supreme. I do miss Walt Disney's replica office, though, in the lobby, and the cast members, I think, did a great job given some history of Walt Disney during the pre-show. We even had friends that were part of this and were cast members, and they all did a great job, and I think you had a lot of people really take pride in it, and it was, I think, really nice, especially for people that didn't know Walt that well or knew the history of him. I thought it was a pretty cool pre-show.
Yeah, it really was.
Well.
It really was. It had some great facts and great artifacts.
Yeah. And so this version would close just after, and I was shocked about this, it only lasted 3.5 years. So it closed February 20th, 2005. So if this opened in summer of 2001, that's 3.5 years, right? Am I doing my math right? Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
So this would later be replaced. It was basically closed for the 50th anniversary. So it was replaced by Disneyland the first 50 magical years. The 50th celebration went on from May 5th, 2005 to September 30th, 2006, which is much shorter than the Year of a Million Dreams. But Disneyland...
The million year of dreams.
Yes, a million years of a few dreams. The first 50 magical years continued until March 15th of 2009, though. So that obviously went on for much longer than the 50th anniversary. And then on February 25th, 2009, Disneyland announced Mr. Lincoln would return and opened on December 18th, 2009. So the newest version, once again, focuses on Lincoln's history, including in its pre-show. There's the return of two brothers. Golden Dreams now plays at the exit, or as guests exit. So at least you still have a little bit of that. It's just a instrumental rendition, I believe. And a beginning also featured the American the Beautiful from the Circle Vision 360 film. And that's how it opens and ends with Battle Hymn of the Republic. It also returned of the original recordings. Apparently it's not the original World's Fair recording. It's another recording they found that has better audio. I guess it was a little bit more crisp, and they ended up using the alteration or the alternate instead. But alas, this newer version is not why we are here today. Instead, we wanted to share the rare Journey to Gettysburg version. While we tease it, we have fond memories of this version. I have attempted to have the audio play more to each ear, but I've done my best. I've done what I could with an old recording. It's not perfect by any means.
Joel's not an audio engineer, guys.
No, and I'm dealing
trying
with
his best.
Really poor audio from, I think, recorded in 2005. So it gets the job done. Lincoln is something hopefully fans continue to cherish and hold dear to their hearts. It's a reminder of how its technological advancements have paved the way for so many more. It's honoring and recognizing the American laborers to the development and achievements of the United States. It's a direct window to Walt Disney's era, and it still speaks to today and the spirit of America. The Gettysburg Address is immortal. Those words remain just as powerful today as they were to Lincoln's time. So let's step back to the early 2000s to Main Street, USA, and the Opera House. Originally recorded by Bryce Al 73, enjoy the great moments with Mr. Lincoln.
One, Lincoln's birthday, he came to school dressed up in his father's frock coat and tall hat and became Abraham Lincoln. And stood up in front of the class and recited the Gettysburg Address. And the teacher was so fascinated, she rushed down the hall and got the principal and brought him to the class and had him listen to Walt give his little speech. And the principal was so fascinated that he took Walt around to all the other classes in the school.
Ever since I was a small boy in Illinois, I've had a great personal admiration for Abraham Lincoln. Now, to recreate a truly lifelike image of Lincoln, we use a new medium of Audio-Animatronics. To start with, we were fortunate in being able to secure this life mask of the 16th president. How did we get this bling?
This is actually a copy of an original life mask by the sculptor Leonard Walt in Chicago in 1860.
Before Lincoln was president.
Before Lincoln was president.
Before he had a beard.
That's right.
Now with this to start with, our sculptor Blaine Gibson has been able to create this very accurate likeness of this great man. During our exhaustive research into Lincoln's life, we studied his mannerisms, his gestures, and even his voice characteristics to create a faithful likeness of this honored man. The final result is so lifelike that you might find it hard to believe.
Hello, my name is Matthew Brady, and I had the honor of being a photographer during one of the most important periods in American history. Back in the 1850s, photography was still considered a new art form. In those days, cameras had no shutters and no film. We would simply remove the lens cap and expose the image on a fragile glass plate. Professional photographers were considered artists, and I was considered one of the best in the world. As my prestige grew, celebrities of government, theater, and society flocked to my gallery to have their portraits made. One day, in 1860, a tall man with large ears and a long nose walked in for a sitting. He was an Illinois attorney named Abraham Lincoln. Just 1 year later, that same man walked into my studio for another sitting. This time he walked in as the 16th President of the United States. And no president had ever taken the oath of office with such a heavy burden on his shoulders. His stance against the westward expansion of slavery caused 11 southern states to declare their independence from the Union. The nation was splitting apart. President Lincoln was doing everything he could to keep it together.
We are not enemies, but friends. We must not be enemies. Though passion may have strained, it must not break our bonds of affection.
But despite that appeal, it was not long before he had a war on his hands. A civil war. Almost overnight, my gallery was filled with young soldiers wanting to have their photographs taken to send off to loved ones. Now, imagine that you are a young soldier on leave here in Washington. Your name is Private John Cunningham. Naturally, you would come to my gallery to have your photograph taken. Well, Private Cunningham, step inside, and my associate Anthony will assist you. I'll be with you in just a few minutes.
Let's see. You must be Private Cunningham, right? Mr. Brady will be with you in just a moment.
Soldier, we're nearly ready to make your photograph. Anthony? Anthony, is the glass plate ready?
Just a minute, Mr. Brady.
As soon as the plate is in the camera, we shall be ready. But before I immortalize you, I think you need a haircut. Anthony!
Sorry.
Give this soldier a trim while I ready a new plate.
All right. Don't worry. I've got lots of people. I mean, they're here. So, bet you've seen a lot of action. I'm thinking of enlisting myself. I'm already used to taking orders. Let me get that hair off you.
Ah, you look much better. Now, hold still. So here you've come to Washington to meet the president. It so happens I'm on my way over there as well. You're welcome to come along with me if you like.
Got it.
Good. Take the private's plate to the darkroom, Anthony.
Right.
Carefully. Then gather my equipment for the White House. So, Private Cunningham, are you ready to meet Abraham Lincoln? Here we are, the White House. My goodness, this Washington weather. The heat doesn't get to you, the insects surely will. Hold still. Oh, look. Here's the President's Secretary, John Hay.
Mr. Brady, the president is just finishing up with Frederick Douglass, but he wanted me to send you right in.
Thank you, Mr. Hay.
Excuse me, I'll come Sorry, gentlemen.
Mr. Brady, please go ahead and set up your equipment.
Thank you, sir.
And who is this young soldier?
Private Cunningham.
I'm very glad to meet you, young man. Please, sit down. Have some coffee. Excuse me.
That's Frederick Douglass sitting opposite the president.
President Lincoln, enlisting black troops in the Army was a substantial achievement, given your stance when the war began.
Yes. When the war began, I insisted it was to preserve the Union and not free the slaves. But since I issued the Emancipation Proclamation, the nature of the war has changed.
Then you must give black soldiers the same pay you give white soldiers.
If we win this war, it will bring a new birth of freedom to all Americans, white as well as black, Mr. Douglas.
Mr. President, I must take my leave. But I assure you, I will continue recruiting black soldiers.
And I assure you, Mr. Douglas, that in the end, they shall have the same pay as white soldiers.
Thank you, Mr. President.
You're very welcome.
Good day, sir.
Mr. Douglas.
Well, Mr. Brady, how would you like me to pose?
I'd like you to look natural.
That is exactly what I would like to avoid. Excuse me, I must ring for my secretary. Mr. Hay.
Yes, sir.
I can't find a thing on this desk. Would you light the lamp?
Of course, sir.
What is this?
An invitation to speak at the Gettysburg ceremony. I think you should decline.
No, Mr. Hay. This could be a chance to tell the nation what we are fighting for. Leave me alone a moment. Everyone, please. Wait, Private Cunningham. A word before you go. My boy, I know you must get back to the Army now and continue to do your duty. And I must get back to mine. Let's hope for both our sakes we can end this war quickly. Goodbye, and may God bless you.
Hey, Cunningham, here you met old Abe. What was he like?
Widen the ranks, soldier.
Tell me later.
Forward, boys, forward! Here they are! Move on!
Cunningham's hit.
Cunningham. Private. You're at St. Elizabeth's Hospital. Your leg was hit pretty bad. I'm sorry. The doctors, they did everything that they could. But I'm afraid that they weren't able to save it. It's the president.
Hello, boys. I can't stay long. I hope you're all comfortable and resting nicely. Nurse.
Sir?
Who is this young man?
Private Cunningham, sir.
Cunningham. I know this man. Oh, this war. This awful, awful war. My boy, you must live. You must live.
Private Cunningham followed the president's order and lived. And when President Lincoln spoke at Gettysburg that November, no one could foresee that the 10 sentences they were about to hear would live on to become one of the great speeches in American history.
That's the president. I can't see.
Is that Lincoln? 77 years ago, our fathers brought forth upon this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation or any nation so conceived and so dedicated can long endure. We are met on a great battlefield of that war. We are met to dedicate a portion of it as the final resting place of those who have given their lives that that nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this, but in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate. We cannot consecrate. We cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here, have consecrated it far above our power to add or to detract. The world will very little note nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. It is for us, the living, rather, to be dedicated here to the unfinished work that they have thus far so nobly carried on. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they here gave the last full measure of devotion, that we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that the nation shall, under God, have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth.
HP 1503, take 1.
Neither let us be slandered from our duty by false accusations against us, nor frightened from it by the menaces of destruction to the government, nor of dungeons to ourselves. Let us have faith that right makes might. And in that faith, let us to the end dare to do our duty as we understand it.
Better, and once more, please, with the thought that you're completely confident of your trust in divine providence and you're very firm in your faith at the end. Shall we try it once more?
Take 4.